We're hosting a family for dinner tomorrow, so I'll be doing some pot pies and taking Fallow's ultimate chicken pie recipe as inspiration. I do have some whole frozen chickens, but they take a while to defrost, and so for this time around I'm just going to be using chicken thighs, about 2.5 pounds worth. They'll be getting a quick rub down of salt, pepper, and garlic powder, get an oily massage, and then they're off to smoke at 275 while we tackle the rest of the filling and the sauce. I'm going to drop the babish bit now. Next up is mushrooms, 8 ounces, cremini. Vigorously wash them to get the dirt off, drain them and wipe down the bowl, then quarter them and remove the rough bits of the stem. Once that's done, we'll set them in the same bowl and move on to shallots. We got 2 of them. We're going to cut off the stem, halve them, quarter them, peel the skins, and cut them into chunky bits so that they don't disappear when they're cooked down. We're going to transfer those into their own bowl, and then it's time to prep a 1/2 pound of bacon. We're going to chop the bacon into lardons, which is French for small bacon, and then set it aside. Then finally we've got our herbs. I bought a small clamshell pack of tarragon from the store and a bunch of parsley, and since the parsley comes in such larger quantities, I'm just matching the amount of ticked parsley to the amount of tarragon by eye. We're then going to start to chiffonade the herbs, which is French for make the herbs small and ribbony, and then run the knife through them more because my knives haven't been sharpened for a while and this isn't going to be a presentation thing anyway. And then that's it for the mise for the fillings. Let's move on to the sauce prep. You thought we were done with alliums? We're never done with alliums. Alliums is Latin for onions and garlic or some shit. Anyway, we got 2 more shallots, but this time we're slicing halves of them thin so that they have more surface area to release their flavors into the liquid. We also have some garlic. My rule of thumb is that whenever I'm reading a recipe written by someone with a skin complexion matching mine, I need to triple the garlic that they call for. My garlic has started to germinate a little bit. That's fine. I'm not a restaurant. The garlic can go into the same prep bowl as the shallots, since we'll be adding them at the same time. Next, we're going to measure out about 1.5 cups of white wine and set that aside. If you don't want to use wine, you could always just skip it and bump up the stock content. Speaking of stock, Fallow's recipe uses what's called double stock, which means that you make stock with water over your ingredients and then use that stock to make more stock. I didn't do that. I didn't buy that. I made a stock overnight with a bunch of lamb bone and chicken scraps. You can also use boxed or canned stock, and if you're doing that, you'll see a nice result if you reduce it down a bit on the stove and fortify it, blah blah blah. We'll save that for a later video. But for now, we're going to take off about 3.5 cups and head over to the stove. We're going to lube up the pan and add our small bacon, and let that get a little color and render before adding in the chunky shallots. We'll incorporate that all together, then add the mushrooms and lower the heat a little bit so that the mushrooms can release their moisture without totally drying out. The moisture they do release should help the other things in the pan not overcook. Once that's all incorporated, we'll take a heavy pan to make our sauce over medium. This is the pan we're going to eventually add all the filling into, so I want it to be big enough to hold our sauce plus our chicken and all the prepped vegetables. Add a bit of oil plus our garlic and shallots to brown until they form a light fond. Once that happens, we'll add in our white wine to deglaze, making sure to scrape up the brown fond, and then we'll add a few sprigs of thyme plus a teaspoon or 2 of dried rosemary. That'll simmer until it's reduced by about 2/3, at which point we will add our 3.5 cups of chicken stock, and then reduce again by half. The way that I estimate how much something needs to reduce is by sticking my spatula down into the bottom of the pan and making a note of where the water line is, and another mental note of where it should be when it's reduced. While we're at it, let's talk about reducing and simmering. Putting your stove on the simmer setting does not mean you will achieve a simmer. This pan is on medium, and this is a simmer. Many bubbles. Bubbles represent liquid boiling. Boiling represents liquid turning into gas. In order to reduce, you need to make liquid turn to gas, and unless you want it to take all day, make the bubbles. It looks like our vegetables for the filling have reduced enough, so I'm going to scoop them out into a bowl. And then once the stock is reduced, we're going to strain out the garlic and the shallots and add about a pint of milk. Fallow's recipe calls for heavy cream, but we're going to be having leftovers for this, and I don't want to eat a heavy cream for multiple days in a row. This is also going to reduce, but only a little bit, so probably about by 1/4 to 1/3. Checking in on the chicken, it looks like it is at a safe temperature now. I don't want to overcook it, so I'm going to pull it Then we're going to bring it over to the cutting board to run a knife through it to make bite-sized chunks. Once we've done that, we'll put it aside, and then it's time to create our beurre manier. Beurre manier is just French for I'm going to make this sauce backwards. Instead of making a roux and then adding liquid, we are going to add the liquid and reduce it, and then add the flour and butter. To a bowl, we're going to add 3 tablespoons of flour, a tablespoon of Dijon mustard, and a tablespoon of miso paste, which is going to carry a lot of glutamates for some umami flavor. Then I'm going to melt 3 tablespoons of butter, and then whisk to incorporate it all into a paste. It's going to end up being rather thick. With that, we have everything we need to finish off the filling, so we'll pile all of our meat and veg together, then head back over to the hob. I've cut the heat on the sauce down to low, and now I'm going to whisk in the beurre manier, which will very quickly thicken the sauce. Now all we have left to do is add all of the rest of the ingredients into the pot and stir to combine. We're going to leave this in the fridge overnight, so I'm pressing some parchment paper down, touching the top of it, and we're going to set it in the fridge before we bake it tomorrow. Beans! Keen listeners may have heard me use the plural word pies, and I can assure you that was on purpose. One of our guests is a vegetarian, so I'm putting together a second improvised filling for a white bean and leek pot pie. Much like shallots taste kind of like a blend between garlic and onion, I consider leeks to be kind of a blend between onion and celery, so I'm basically going to treat them as part of the mirepoix, slicing the lighter part of a large one in half lengthwise, and then slicing into thinner half moons. After that, we're just doing the rest of the mirepoix, which is onion, celery, and carrots. I'm not going super chunky on these, more like a large dice. I don't want them to disappear into the sauce, but I do want the white beans to feature more. For each thing I'm dicing here, I'm adding it to the same prep bowl, which is a perfect segue into a rant that I've had stored up for a while now, so strap in. Before we start, I'm going to show some examples of what I'm talking about, but I want to make it clear that I love all of these channels and that you should absolutely watch them. I'll drop a link to all the videos in the description. This is a me problem, not them. That said, this drives me fucking nuts. I watch a lot of cooking content, and one of my major pet peeves is the way so many of them do mise en place. To be clear, I 100% agree that you should have your things prepped ahead of time, but I think a lot of how food creators display mise to an audience is heavily influenced by how restaurants do things, not the way home cooks do. Number 1, many glass bowls. This omelet has lobster, crab, and cheese all going in at the same time, but they're in multiple bowls. This is from Epicurious, and so I doubt Chef Honcho is doing her own dishes, but basically every home cook does. Chef Frank Proto, another Epicurious contributor, has a background as a restaurant chef, and he also teaches for the Institute of Culinary Education. In this video, we have 3 glass bowls holding raw meat, eggs in their own glass bowl, garlic in its own glass bowl, breadcrumbs in their own glass bowl, cheese in its own glass bowl. Why do you want to wash all of these bowls? They're all going to be added at the same time. You could just prep them into the same bowl. In a restaurant, you have A, scale, and B, flexibility. Chopping 30 onions at a time is a normal thing, having them in a Cambro for you to pull from is a normal thing, and it's all done at the beginning of the day or the night before and then used to make tons of different dishes. And in the end, you have an industrial dishwasher that finishes in 3 minutes instead of 2 hours, and paid staff that handles all of that. And this is my motivation for recording all of this. I increasingly watch more and more professionals, but I have no desire to open a restaurant. Overwhelmingly, I've needed to translate those techniques to my home kitchen, and I hope my compulsion to do so can help anyone looking to level up. Anyway, the garlic has a low smoke point, so that does get its own bowl. And then after that, we're going to small dice a single Yukon Gold potato to add a bit more chew and starch to the final product. Then finally, the star of the show is going to be our white beans. We're going to open 1 can of those, drain them and rinse them, and then set them aside into their own bowl because they will be added separately. After checking that the oil is hot enough with a single leek slice, all the mirepoix is going to go into the pan and we'll reduce that down. About 1.5 tablespoons of tomato paste goes in to make a pinçage. Garlic can go in after that and we can reduce the heat. This time around I'm using shiitake mushrooms. I want them to be a little bit meatier and I'm going to chop them a little bit rougher. Once the tomato paste has cooked off a little, we'll move that whole mirepoix situation back into the same bowl we used for prepping it. Re-lube the pan and then go in with the shiitakes. And we already have white wine open, so fuck it, white wine goes well with mushrooms. Once those have cooked down, they can join the mirepoix dish efficiency party. Shaking your mirepoix makes it taste better. This is scientifically proven. We still have a large amount of parsley left over, so I'm taking a fistful of that and chopping it down similar to how I did for the chicken pie, and then setting that aside for when we're ready to add the fillings to the sauce, which we're going to make right now. This time we're going to go the roux route, melting a couple of tablespoons of butter and then whisking in a couple of tablespoons of flour, toasting that down until the raw flour smell is gone. And then we're going to add a couple cups of vegetable stock to make a velouté, which is bechamel's stockier cousin. Once we've done that, and the sauce is leaving a slight trace when I drag a spatula through it, I'm going to use it to temper 1 tablespoon or so of Dijon mustard, mix that together, and then add it back into the sauce. And this time we're actually done for the day after we incorporate the veg, beans, and herbs into the sauce, stir to combine, and then I'll add parchment paper and fridge this one as well until tomorrow. Just kidding, I have some dried sage in the spice drawer here, and I'm going to add about 1 teaspoon of that. Now I'm serious, we're done. Good morning. I've got my oven preheated to 400 and it's time to fill the dishes. I have a 9-inch pie dish for the chicken pie and I'm just going to cover it with some store-bought puff pastry, gently pressing it down with my fingertips next to the edge. Make sure that you actually read the instructions on store-bought puff pastry for how long it should take to defrost. Many pot pie recipes will tell you it takes about 15 minutes. Mine took 4 hours. I'm going to use my paring knife to cut 4 slits to allow the pie to vent, and then I'm going to go back and widen them a little bit to make a little bit nicer of a design. We're going to do an egg wash with just 1 egg, whisking it well and then being sure to get coverage on all of the pastry with it. Now that the chicken pie is sorted, I'm going to repeat the same process with the vegetable pie filling, but I'm using a smaller dish here because there's not as much of it. This is a 9-inch tart dish rather than a pie dish. The pastry tore a little bit while I was pressing it down, so I took some of the scraps I had from trimming the edges of the pie to perform some reconstructive surgery. And then the final step is just to bake in our 400-degree oven for about 30 to 45 minutes or until the crust turns a golden brown. And that's all I have for you today. I don't know how often I'm going to be making videos like this, but if you subscribe and click the bell, you'll know if I do. See ya!
Oh, sorry, I didn't let you take a picture.
I already took pictures. I'm just trying to get you.